I can still remember the exact moment my world fell apart. The cold, lifeless stare in my mother-in-law's eyes as she stood in the doorway, blocking me from entering my own home. The way my husband, David, refused to meet my gaze, his arms crossed over his chest like a coward, and the sound of my children, my babies, crying somewhere behind them, their little voices muffled by the walls that were suddenly closing in around me. You need to leave. The words sliced through me, leaving a wound that would never fully heal. You're no longer welcome here, and you won't be seeing the children again. I felt my breath hitch, my body swaying slightly as if the floor beneath me had disappeared. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of nightmare. David? My voice barely came out. What is she talking about? But he didn't answer. He just stood there, silent. And that was when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. They had planned this. They had waited for this. And I had walked right into their trap. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. David was raised by his mother alone after his father abandoned them when he was just a boy. She had been everything to him, his protector, his caretaker, his entire world. I found it sweet at first, the way he spoke so highly of her, the way he looked after her so diligently. But then we got married. And I quickly realized that I wasn't just marrying David. I was marrying her too. At first, it was little things. She would call him multiple times a day, asking about the tiniest details of our life. She would make comments about the way I cooked, the way I cleaned, the way I wasn't doing enough to take care of her son. David never liked his eggs that way. You should really take better care of your appearance. A man likes a woman who makes an effort. I don't know how you manage, dear. The house is always so chaotic when I visit. I was patient. I really was. I thought if I ignored it, if I proved myself to her, she would accept me. But she didn't want to accept me. She wanted to replace me. And the worst part? David let her. Whenever I tried to bring it up, he would defend her. She's just trying to help. You're overreacting, babe. She means well. Come on, she raised me by herself. Can't you just be a little more understanding? And whenever he did try to talk to her, she made sure I paid for it. She would suddenly forget to pick up the kids from school, forcing me to drop everything to get them. She would tell David terrible things about me, spinning stories so twisted that he believed her. It was like she had a hold on him. A grip so tight that no matter what I did, no matter how much I loved him, she would always have more power over him than I did. But the straw that broke the camel's back? That came the day I suggested she move out. She had moved in when the kids were little, under the guise of helping me. I had been exhausted, juggling 2 young children, the house, and my job. Just until the little ones are older, she had said. That was 10 years ago. My oldest was now 15. My youngest was 10. They didn't need constant care anymore. So one evening, I sat David down and said it plainly. I think it's time your mother gets her own place. The room went silent. David didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He just stared at me like I had slapped him. That's not funny, Lisa. I'm not joking. The kids are older now. She moved in to help, and I appreciated it, but she doesn't need to be here anymore. I was careful. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't asking him to cut her off. I just wanted our home back. She has nowhere else to go, he said. She can get an apartment nearby. We'll still see her often. But that wasn't her plan. That night, David told her what I had said, and that was the beginning of the end. Because my mother-in-law didn't just leave. She eliminated me. Around that time, I had started becoming close to my neighbor, Mr. Walker, who also happened to be my son Adrian's teacher. He was a kind man, someone I could talk to when things at home became unbearable. I thought nothing of it. But my mother-in-law? She saw an opportunity. She began spinning lies to David, whispering poison into his ears. Lisa is seeing another man. I caught them together multiple times. Look at these pictures. Tell me this doesn't look suspicious. I don't know how she got those pictures. Maybe she followed me, maybe she paid someone. But it worked. Because when David confronted me, he was already convinced. How long, Lisa? He had asked, his voice hollow. How long have you been cheating on me? I had laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so insane that I couldn't believe he actually thought I would betray him. You believe your mother over me? I asked, stunned. Don't lie to me, he shouted. I know the truth. I've seen the proof. Nothing I said mattered. He had made up his mind, and I never imagined he would go as far as cutting me off from my children completely. But he did. I came home one evening to find the locks changed. I knocked, pounded on the door, screaming for someone to let me in, and then she appeared, standing there, smug and victorious, a stack of papers in her hand. You don't live here anymore, she said. David has full custody of the children. The court has already ruled in his favor. That's not possible, I whispered. It is, my love, so you better get used to it. Behind her, David stood motionless, and he wasn't stopping her. The police arrived minutes later, and just like that, I lost everything. The last thing I heard before I walked away was the sound of my children crying inside. And that was when I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to let her win. One day, the truth would come out, and when it did, she would regret ever crossing me. They say when a house burns down, the smell of smoke lingers long after the flames are gone. That's how it felt in the weeks after I lost everything. The ashes of my life were everywhere, on my skin, in my lungs, choking me every time I tried to breathe. David and his mother had made sure I had no home, no money, and worst of all, no way to find my children. But there was one thing they underestimated. I wasn't done fighting. For weeks, I existed in a fog. I stayed in a dingy motel, living off the little cash I had left. I tried everything, calling old friends, visiting the schools, even tracking down David's co-workers, desperate for a clue about my children's whereabouts. Nothing. David had erased me from their lives so completely, it was like I had never existed. Every morning, I woke up in a cold sweat, haunted by the same thought. What if they forget me? But no matter how much I wanted to crumble, I couldn't, because if I gave up, David and his mother would win, and I refused to let that happen. I needed help, and there was only one person I could think of. Daniel Walker, Adrian's teacher, my neighbor, and the man whose name had been dragged through the mud right alongside mine. I hadn't seen or spoken to him since the day David threw me out. I figured he'd want nothing to do with me, considering how my mother-in-law had painted us both as cheaters. But desperation has a way of making you take risks. So one evening, I stood outside his small apartment, my heart hammering in my chest as I knocked. The door opened, and there he was. Lisa? He said, his eyes widening in shock. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. Then, before I could stop myself, I broke down. Tears spilled down my face as weeks of pain, betrayal, and fear came crashing over me. I told him everything. How David believed his mother's lies, how they took my children and disappeared, how I had nothing left. When I finished, I expected him to pity me, maybe even distance himself to avoid more trouble. But instead, his face darkened. I knew something was wrong, he said. I frowned. What do you mean? He let out a slow, steady breath before stepping aside. Come in. There's something you need to see. Inside, Daniel pulled out his phone and handed it to me. When I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. There they were. Photos of us. Not real photos, but staged ones. Edited to make it look like we were sneaking around, holding hands, leaning in close like lovers. Even a video, clearly doctored, where it looked like I was whispering in his ear. Where did you get these? I whispered, my hands trembling. Daniel's jaw tightened. A few weeks ago, I found an envelope in my school mailbox. No name, no return address, just these photos and a note inside. What did it say? He hesitated, his expression grim. Then he repeated the words that had cost him everything. Resign quietly, or we show these to the school board. A cold chill ran down my spine. They blackmailed you? I breathed. He nodded. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew it wasn't good. If those photos got out, I'd lose my job. Maybe even my teaching license. I had no choice. I felt sick. I had spent weeks thinking I was alone in my suffering, but the truth was, Daniel had been collateral damage in my mother-in-law's war against me. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, he admitted, rubbing a hand over his face. After I resigned, I went to your house. I knocked, but he trailed off, his expression darkening. Your mother-in-law answered the door, and your husband was right behind her. I froze. What did they say? Daniel's voice dropped to a quiet, controlled anger. She looked me dead in the eye and said, if you know what's good for you, you'll walk away. And then your husband threatened to call the cops if I didn't leave immediately. My blood ran cold. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. They made sure I had no way to fight back, I murmured. Not anymore, Daniel said. I looked up at him. What do you mean? I might not have proof, he said, but I have a friend, a private investigator. He's very good at what he does. My breath caught in my throat. You'd help me? Daniel met my gaze. Lisa, I lost everything because of them too. You deserve to know the truth, and more than that, your kids deserve to know the truth. A tear slipped down my cheek. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely alone. 2 days after meeting Daniel, I sat in his tiny living room, my hands gripping the edge of his coffee table as we waited for his investigator friend, Mark, to arrive. I hadn't slept. I had been running on coffee and fury, my mind playing and replaying the last moments in my house. David's cold eyes, his mother's smug smile, my children crying in confusion. When the door finally opened and a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, I felt my pulse skyrocket. Lisa, this is Mark, Daniel introduced. Mark nodded at me and sat down, pulling out a folder. I did some digging. You were right. David and his mother didn't exactly disappear. They moved to a gated community 3 towns over. It's a nice place, quiet, mostly retirees. My breath caught. Did you find my kids? Mark nodded. They're still with them, and from what I could gather, they've been told you abandoned them. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. That's a lie, I whispered, my hands shaking. Of course it is, Mark said, but to them, it's the truth. Your mother-in-law has been spinning her web for years, hasn't she? I swallowed hard. Since the day I married David. Mark leaned back. Then I hate to say it, but this isn't just about taking your kids away from you. This is about control. I closed my eyes, my body tense. As we sat there, Mark flipped through more pages of his report. Your mother-in-law has a history of doing this, you know, he said casually. I blinked. What? He tapped a document. David was engaged once before you, back when he was 25. My heart nearly stopped. What happened? Same story, different woman, Mark said. She convinced him his fiancée was cheating, made his life hell until he ended it, and guess what? He believed every word. I felt a slow, burning rage rise in my chest. So it had never been about me. She would have done this to any woman who married David. I had spent years blaming myself, thinking maybe if I had been more patient, more understanding, more something, things would have been different. But they wouldn't have been, because the only way to have kept my marriage was to have let my mother-in-law control my life. And I had never been that kind of woman. I thought back to the early years of my marriage. At first, I had found David's closeness to his mother cute. She called him every morning. She sent him lunch to work. She fussed over his clothes, his diet, his sleeping habits. But then I started noticing the way she looked at me, like I was stealing something from her. At first, she was passive-aggressive. She'd make little remarks about how I should be the one packing his lunches, or how I should learn how he liked his shirts ironed. Then, when that didn't work, she became more direct. She'd accidentally forget to pick up the kids from school. She'd complain about how miserable she was living with us, making David feel guilty. She'd tell him little lies about me, twisting my words, creating problems that didn't exist. And David, he always believed her. "She's just trying to help," he would say when I tried to talk to him. "You're overreacting." "She's my mother, Lisa. You can't expect me to turn my back on her." And the worst part, I had been patient. I had waited hoping David would set boundaries. But when I finally asked him to tell his mother to move out, that was when she struck. That was when she made sure I was gone instead. Daniel exhaled. "So now what? What do you want to do?" I clenched my fists. "I want my kids to know the truth." Mark studied me. "You know that's going to take time, right? They've been poisoned against you." I swallowed hard. "I don't care. I'll take as long as I need. I just want them to know I never abandoned them." Mark nodded. "I can help with that. But Lisa, David might be spineless, but his mother? She won't give them up easily. She'll fight to keep her grip on them." I met his gaze, my jaw set. "Then let's fight back." I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a mind full of rage. Mark, the private investigator, had tried his best to help me get back my children. He found the paper trail, proof that David had wiped my name off all records, and even got a court order claiming I was an unfit mother. I didn't even get to fight it in court, because, as Mark warned me, I would lose. David had the money, the influence, and I had nothing. It was as if I had never existed. And then, as if the universe wasn't done punishing me, tragedy struck. I was in a car accident, a bad one. I woke up in a hospital bed with a fractured leg, broken ribs, and a concussion. And the worst part, I was unconscious for weeks. By the time I was discharged, my children had been completely wiped from my world. I had no idea where they lived, no way to reach them. Mark tried to track them down, but David was smart. They had moved states, changed schools, even changed phone numbers. I had no way in, and for the first time in my life, I felt like giving up. People always say, "If I were you, I would have fought harder." Would you? Would you fight when you have no home, no money, no legal way to see your own children? I spent the first 5 years surviving, taking whatever jobs I could, sleeping in shelters when things got rough. There were days I didn't eat, days I wondered if my children even remembered me. And then, on my darkest night, when I had almost lost hope, I saw something that changed everything. A news article. A familiar name. Young lawyer Adrian Michaels joins prestigious law firm. Adrian, my son. I barely recognized him in the photo. He was older, taller, sharper, but it was him. And now I had a way back in. It took me another 5 years to rebuild myself. I got a job, found stability, saved enough money to hire Mark again. "I never thought I'd hear from you again," he admitted when I called. "I never gave up," I told him. This time, Mark had more resources. He found out where my children lived, what they did, who they surrounded themselves with, and most importantly, he confirmed my worst fear. My mother-in-law was still in their lives. She had planted herself so deeply that she had become their only mother figure. And she had done everything in her power to erase me. I wasn't just fighting David. I was fighting the woman who had orchestrated my downfall from the very beginning. I knew I couldn't just knock on Adrian's door and say, "Surprise, I'm your mother." I needed a way in, a way to get close without raising suspicion. And then fate stepped in. One afternoon, while sitting in a cafe, I saw someone I never expected to see again. Karen, my old friend. And I got to also find out she was Sophie's university professor. I froze, unsure if I should approach her, but I didn't have to, because the moment Karen saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "Lisa?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. "It's me." Karen stared at me, mouth slightly open, then glanced around as if making sure no one else had noticed. "Where have you been? Everyone thought you just disappeared. I let out a shaky breath. I didn't disappear, Karen. Karen and I sat for hours, catching up. I told her everything. How David and his mother had stolen my children, how they had moved away, changed everything, and made sure I had no way of reaching them. Karen looked pale. Lisa, I always had my doubts about your mother-in-law, but this, she exhaled, this is pure evil. And then she told me something that made my stomach drop. Sophie asked me a question the other day, Karen said. She asked if memories could be manipulated. My heart pounded. What did you tell her? The truth. That if someone they trusted fed them enough lies, they could believe anything. I leaned forward. Karen, I need your help. She didn't hesitate. Tell me what to do. Karen invited me to a university seminar the following week. Sophie would be there, and I would just be a stranger in the audience. But fate had other plans. After the seminar, as people were leaving, I was standing near the exit when Sophie walked straight past me, and then she stopped. She turned around looking at me with a strange expression. Do I know you? She asked hesitantly. My breath caught. I forced a polite smile. I don't think so. She frowned, staring at me longer than necessary. Then she shook her head. Sorry, you just look familiar. She walked away, and my heart shattered. She didn't know me, but she felt something, and that was enough. For 10 years, they had erased me. For 10 years, they had fed my children lies. But the moment Sophie hesitated, the moment she wondered who I was, I knew I was finally getting my children back. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The letter came on a quiet Wednesday morning. I had been sipping my coffee, staring out at the city skyline, when the envelope slipped through the mail slot. At first, I ignored it. Most of my mail was junk, charity requests, local ads, bills. But something about this envelope felt different. It wasn't from a company. It wasn't from Karen. The handwriting on the front was neat, familiar in a way that made my heart clench. I hesitated before opening it, my fingers trembling. Then, as I unfolded the crisp paper inside, my breath caught in my throat. Mom, if you're willing, we'd like to meet you. The signature at the bottom, Adrian. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours pacing my small apartment, heart pounding, mind racing. What did he mean by we? Was Sophie ready too? Did they hate me? Did they blame me? I had waited for this moment for 10 years. And yet, now that it was here, I felt paralyzed with fear. But when the time came, I forced myself to step into the cafe. Adrian was already there, sitting in the corner, a coffee in front of him, tapping his fingers against the table, a habit he'd had since he was a child. He looked up when he saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stood. Mum. Just one word, but it shattered me. Tears burned in my eyes as I sat down, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Adrian? His face softened. I have a lot to tell you. He didn't rush. He let the words unfold like a confession long overdue. Dad had passed away 2 weeks ago, Adrian said quietly. I sucked in a sharp breath. I should have felt relief, maybe even anger, but instead, all I felt was sorrow. Not for David, but for the years we lost, for the damage his weakness had caused. Before he died, he told us everything. And then Adrian told me the truth. Dad had been sick in the last few years. Parkinson's, Adrian whispered. It started with tremors, small at first, unnoticeable, but eventually it grew worse. And one day, when a doctor mentioned that Parkinson's could be hereditary, he began to ask questions. Why hadn't he ever heard of a history of Parkinson's in his family? His mother had always told him that his father had abandoned them, that he had been a coward, that he didn't deserve to be found. But when Dad got sick, he needed answers, and that was when he learned the truth. His father had never abandoned him. His mother had abandoned his father after. When he got sick, when his Parkinson's became too much, she ran. She took Dad and fled, making sure his father would never find them again. She built her entire life on that lie, Adrian said bitterly. Dad spent his whole life thinking he owed her everything, that he had to be grateful, but he never realized she had been lying all these while. By the time he learned the truth, it was too late. Parkinson's had already begun to steal him away. He said he wished he had done better by you, that he should have fought for you. My throat tightened. And Sophie? Adrian exhaled slowly. She still struggles with it, but she knows the truth now. She confronted Grandma. We both did. What happened? I whispered. She didn't deny it, Adrian said, shaking his head. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to say. We left her to rot in her lies. I swallowed hard. After all these years, the truth had finally come to light. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small, worn photograph. I gasped. It was us. Me, him, and Sophie, when they were just kids, smiling, before everything fell apart. I found this hidden in an old box, Adrian murmured, and I realized I always knew you never left us by choice. Tears spilled down my cheeks. He took my hand in his, squeezing it. I missed you, Mum. I let out a broken sob. I missed you too. And for the first time in 10 years, I held my son in my arms again. Lisa wasn't expecting anything significant that week. After all, she had spent the last few days trying to process everything Adrian had revealed. The truth about her ex-husband's cowardice, the tragic lie he had been fed all his life, and the devastating betrayal that had shaped the course of their lives. But when she received an invitation from Karen to a small meet and greet, she didn't hesitate. Karen had always been kind, and right now, kindness was a comfort. But when she arrived at the quiet, private space Karen had arranged for the meeting, she immediately sensed something was different. There was only one person seated at the far end of the room, Sophia. Lisa froze. Her daughter sat stiffly, her hands clasped together tightly as if holding herself back from something. Their eyes met. Neither moved. For a moment, the room was thick with silence, stretching unbearably long. Then, all at once, Sophia shot up from her seat. Lisa barely had time to react before her daughter threw herself into her arms. Mum, Sophia choked out, gripping her tightly. Lisa's arms instinctively wrapped around her daughter, holding her like she had wished to for years. And then Sophia sobbed. The sound was raw, broken, like a child grieving for something long lost. I hated you, Sophia admitted through her tears. Her voice was muffled against Lisa's shoulder. For years, I hated you. I hated you for leaving. I hated you for not fighting for us. I hated you for not giving us any explanation before leaving us all alone. Lisa's chest tightened, but she didn't say anything. This wasn't the moment to interrupt. I wanted Grandma to be wrong, Sophia whispered. I wanted it to be a lie, but I still believed her. And when I saw you at the conference, I recognized you. I knew it was you, but I didn't know how to react. I was afraid of what I'd feel. Lisa squeezed her eyes shut, holding Sophia even closer. When Dad died and Adrian told me everything, I still couldn't believe it, Sophia admitted. I didn't want to believe it. How could the woman who raised me, who held my hand through everything, be the same person who stole my mother from me? Lisa felt Sophia's shoulders shake. I was so angry. I felt like my whole life had been built on lies. And even after I knew the truth, I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I thought, what if you don't want me anymore? What if I was too late? Lisa finally pulled back just enough to look at her daughter's tear-streaked face. She cupped Sophia's cheeks with trembling hands. My baby, it was never too late, Lisa whispered. Sophia let out a broken laugh, pressing her forehead against her mother's. Karen helped me. So did my therapist. And I knew that I needed to see you, to say I'm sorry. Lisa shook her head. You have nothing to be sorry for, my love. You were a child. You trusted the people who raised you. This was never your fault. They held each other for what felt like forever, Karen watching from the corner with tears in her eyes. For the first time in years, Lisa felt whole. Later that evening, Lisa sat with both her children at a small lounge at the university, catching up, laughing, reminiscing. Sophia was still cautious, as if afraid this was all a dream that could shatter at any moment. But Lisa was patient. She would give her daughter all the time she needed. Then, suddenly, the door opened. Lisa turned, and her body stiffened at the sight of the last person she ever expected to see. Her mother-in-law. The older woman stood there, hesitant, her usually sharp, domineering presence replaced with something pitiful. Tears glistened in her eyes. And for the first time in my life, I saw desperation in her eyes. She walked straight toward me, stopping just a few feet away. "Lisa?" I stiffened. "What are you doing here?" Her lip trembled. "I have no one left." Silence. Adrian and Sophia exchanged a look but said nothing. "After David passed, my grandchildren abandoned me." She choked up. "I know I was wrong. I know I destroyed everything. But please, I have nothing left." I stared at her. This was the woman who had ripped my life apart, who had lied, manipulated, and controlled everything in her path. And now that she was alone, she expected forgiveness? "Where was this remorse when you took my children away from me?" I asked coldly. "Where was this grief when you destroyed my marriage? When you stole my children? When you lied for years and let me suffer?" Tears streamed down her wrinkled face. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," her mother-in-law whispered, her voice trembling. "But I just wanted you to know. I regret it. I regret everything." Lisa scoffed. "Regret?" she asked, her voice cold. "Do you even understand what you did to me? What you did to my children? You broke our family." "I know," she whispered, "and I'll live with that. I had to say it." Lisa exhaled sharply and stood up. "I have nothing to say to you." She turned to leave. But then Sophia grabbed her hand. Lisa looked down at her daughter in surprise. "Mum," Sophia said gently, "I know she doesn't deserve your forgiveness. I know she tore us apart. But if you hold on to this anger, it'll never leave you. It'll poison you the way it poisoned her. And I don't want that for you." Lisa's lips parted, but she couldn't find the words. Sophia continued, "Grandma lied about you, just like she lied to Dad about his father, just like she ran from the things she couldn't control. But if we abandon her now, aren't we just becoming her? Aren't we doing exactly what she did?" Lisa looked at her daughter, then at Adrian, who was watching quietly. She swallowed hard. Her daughter was right. Lisa took a deep breath, then cupped Sophia's face. "How did you grow up to be such a kind, graceful woman?" she asked softly. Sophia smiled tearfully. "Because I had you as my mother." Lisa's heart clenched. She turned back to her mother-in-law, who was watching with helpless eyes. "I'm letting this go," Lisa said firmly. "Not for you, but for them." Sophia and Adrian both smiled. Lisa exhaled, then turned to her children. "Come here." They immediately wrapped their arms around her, squeezing tightly. Lisa let herself bask in the warmth of their embrace, feeling the weight of the past lift just a little. Then, hesitantly, she glanced at her mother-in-law. With a small, almost imperceptible nod, she motioned for the older woman to join. Her mother-in-law gasped softly, then stepped forward. The embrace wasn't warm. It wasn't easy. But it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough.